Regal Robot recently sent me their new archive collection Prune Face concept maquette. We'll be taking a look at that in just a little bit, but first I think we need to talk about Prune Face. Star Wars has more than its fair share of obscure characters, but I think Prune Face may take the prize for the most obscure character to appear in Kenner's line of vintage toys, because almost nobody, including Kenner themselves, seemed to know who he was. Allow me to explain. Despite his formidable appearance, Prune Face was actually a member of the Rebel Alliance. He can be seen, for a few seconds at least, in the conference room here, where the Rebels are planning their attack on the Death Star 2. Here he is, sitting next to two other members of his species, which would later become known as Dracelians. The one with the eye patch, played by Colin Hunt, is the one we commonly refer to as Prune Face. Ironically, he has the least screen time out of the three, partially because he keeps getting hidden behind other characters' heads. Whether it's this guy, or Admiral Akbar later on in the scene, we don't actually get to see a lot of Prune Face, and that's pretty much it for his appearance in the film. A bit later on, when Han is saying goodbye to Lando, we do see a hooded figure going up into the Millennium Falcon that looks like it could be at least one of the same species, but there's no indication that it's the same one that we saw earlier with the eye patch. And that's it. We don't see him again in the film. During the Ewok celebration on Endor at the end of the film, we do see one of Prune Face's species kind of dancing there in the background, but we don't see the one with the eye patch at all. Interestingly, the extended celebration scene at the end of the special edition of Return of the Jedi shows two of Prune Face's species dancing there in the background. It's a little hard to see, but I don't think either one of these has an eye patch, however. The character of Prune Face was created by Tom Santamon, who has had a distinguished career in the film industry and did a lot of other work on Return of the Jedi as well, including building the armatures for the Scout Walkers and puppeteering the Rancor's arms. He even built the armature for the Rancor when they were still considering making the Rancor a stop-motion puppet. Like many of the aliens in Return of the Jedi, the character of Prune Face started out as a small statue called a maquette. Tom sculpted the Prune Face maquette, as well as the maquette for Cain Addis, who is another Jabba's Palace creature or creatures that we will have to take a closer look at someday. As you can see, the original Prune Face maquette did not feature the hood or the eye patch that would later become associated with the character. In fact, many people have pointed out that without them, he bears a striking resemblance to E.T. the Extraterrestrial. It should be noted, though, that E.T. was still in development around the same time as Return of the Jedi, and Mr. Santamon has gone on the record saying that he had never seen the character until months after he had designed Prune Face. Interestingly, Mr. Santamon did actually work on E.T. the Extraterrestrial, but it was later after he had designed Prune Face, and he had nothing to do with E.T.'s actual design. He only worked on some of the puppets for the bikes that the kids would ride into the sky. I just chalked this up to being an interesting coincidence. The alien design from the maquette was used as the basis for some concept artwork by Nilo Rodis Jamero, and then this was turned into a full-sized costume. Mr. Santamon says that he was the one who actually sculpted the full-sized head and hands, so he actually had a hand, so to speak, in creating the actual thing we saw on screen as well. So that's a quick and dirty intro to the character of Prune Face, but to really appreciate his impact on Star Wars fandom, I think you have to look at the Kenner action figure. Yes, Kenner did include Prune Face as one of the toys in their vintage Return of the Jedi action figure line. It's important to keep in mind that the vintage toy packaging didn't really include any kind of explanation about the characters. And in an era before the internet or even easy access to the films on home video, it was often simply impossible to look up who a particular character was. Since the same toy line included Jabba's Palace aliens with names like Squid Head and Yak Face that you could barely see in the film, it was reasonable to assume that a character called Prune Face who looked like this was also a member of Jabba's gang. And I'm sure that most of the kids who somehow ended up with a Prune Face figure would have used him as a Jabba's Palace alien, or at least as a bad guy of some kind. I think he's a pretty decent looking figure though, and he adds some nice variety to your display, regardless of how you use him. But yes, there was a lot of confusion regarding just who this guy was, and I think you can make the argument that Kenner also didn't understand who he was either. If you look at this vintage Return of the Jedi coloring book, you can see that Prune Face, while he does get a page to himself, which is nice, is actually shown as being in Jabba's palace, as you can see from this archway, and it's even more clear if you look at the facing page, which shows Squidhead and the character that would later become known as Tanis Spijek, both of whom are, of course, Jabba's palace characters. By the way, I found this excellent pre-colored version of these pages in an eBay listing recently. Even more confusingly, later on, when they were trying to clear out some slow-moving figures by selling 3-packs, Kenner released this one called the Empire that included the Rancor Keeper, Prune Face, and the ATST driver. Even if they thought Prune Face was from Jabba's palace, 2 out of 3 of these characters are clearly not members of the Empire, but there's a tendency to just use the Empire as a shorthand for bad guys, and I think that's probably what happened here. In 1995, a book by West End Games called Galaxy Guide 12, Aliens, Enemies, and Allies included a little bit about Prune Face and gave him his first actual name, Orrimaarko. This was created by Pablo Hidalgo in honor of a friend of his, apparently. I think this book did make it clear that Prune Face, or Orrimaarko, was a member of the Rebel Alliance, but in all honesty, not too many people probably would have seen it, and I've heard many adult collectors say that until very recently they didn't realize that Prune Face was not a bad guy and he wasn't a member of Jabba's palace. So I think we should set the record straight and say once and for all that Prune Face is a good guy, he was a member of the Rebel Alliance, and not a Jabba's palace alien or any other kind of bad guy, so to speak. However, in honor of the fact that so many kids thought that he was a Jabba's palace alien, and he even appeared in that coloring book that I mentioned earlier, I propose that we add a little bit to his backstory, saying that he was actually in Jabba's palace, but he was working as an undercover scout similar to Lando, and that he was helping pave the way for the operation to rescue Han. And in honor of this, I think I'm going to be displaying my vintage Prune Face figure in my Jabba's palace display. But anyway, at long last, here is Regal Robot's replica of the concept maquette, the first appearance of the Prune Face character, sculpted by Tom Sanamon. And as you can see, it is very similar to the picture that I showed earlier in the video. It's a relatively small bust and has somewhat subtle paintwork on it. That's true of the original maquette as well, as far as I can tell. But if you look closely, you can see some subtle pinks and tans and browns and things that they've used, and especially the eyes, I think, really look quite good. They give him a thoughtful quality and not at all an evil-looking quality. It doesn't seem like an evil character just based on this maquette. And in fact, that goes along with something that Mr. Sanamon said in an interview with Tom Spina of Regal Robot. Tom Spina says, "As a kid with the action figure, I always assumed he was a bad guy from Jabba's palace, but it turns out he was a rebel. Did you think of him as a bad guy or a good guy?" Mr. Sanamon replied, "I always thought of him as a good guy. I recall putting a pair of brown, human-looking eyes in the maquette. They were glass doll's eyes, not scary monster eyes." And I can really see that looking at this replica as well. So this maquette is available in 2 different versions. The one I was sent was the Signature Edition, which comes with a plaque like this one, signed by Tom Sanamon, which is similar to the other ones that they've provided with other archive collection maquettes. The Signature Edition is limited to 100 pieces, but they also have a Legacy Edition that is going to be limited to just 83 pieces. The Legacy Edition concept debuted with the Rancor concept maquette, and it sold out very, very quickly in about 10 minutes, so it was clearly very popular. Basically, it means that the person who had originally made the maquette will create some unique artwork for each of the Legacy Edition pieces. So in this case, it means that Mr. Sanamon made 83 unique sketches of Prune Face to accompany all of the Legacy Edition pieces. I'm really a fan of the Legacy Edition concept. I like the idea of having a unique piece of artwork created by the person who also created the maquette that you get, so definitely give that a look. But regardless of which version you decide to get, they're both going to be available at noon Eastern Standard Time on January 9th, so by the time you're able to watch this video, they should be available for order. The Signature Edition will be $2.99 and the Legacy Edition will be $5.99. And I'm told that they're going to be going out to customers pretty quickly. They're being made as we speak. And they also have a payment plan in case you want to use that. I'll put a link to the product page in the video description, so check that out. My thanks go out to Regal Robot for sending this out to me for review. I really enjoyed researching this character, and in some sense, I think of him as an honorary Jabba's Palace character, so I think he fits right in around here. And certainly when it comes to obscure aliens, that's right up my alley. And if you're interested in learning more about Prune Face, you can check out the links I'm going to put in the video description, including one to the Kivecast podcast. In episode number 116, they talk about Prune Face and even interview some people who have a Prune Face focused collection, which was very interesting. Thanks very much for watching. I'm kind of interested to know if you knew who Prune Face was. Did you think he was a bad guy or a member of Jabba's palace? Or did you know where he appeared in Return of the Jedi? Let me know in the video comments. And as always, my thanks go out to my Patreon supporters, including my Palace VIPs, and especially Angelica Brady and Jesper Murtu. Thanks very much for your support. If you'd like to know how you can support the channel for as little as $1 a month, you can check the link in the video description.